Chapter 5 Social and Political Principles of Christendom. Social life permeated by the Christian spirit. The whole structure of medieval society was founded upon Christianity. All the people were Catholic, and ecclesiastical influence was very powerful. Christian principles were inculcated in the current literature, the pulpit, the schools, and the tribunal of penance, and were taken for granted, even when not faithfully followed, by all classes of society. The laws and their administration, the economic policy of the state, the recognized relations between the different classes, even international politics were judged by Christian standards. So strong and deep-rooted was public opinion in the matter that it was difficult for individuals to disregard these standards openly. Kenelm Digby mentions many interesting particulars, illustrating the Catholic tone of public life. Thus, a painting of the crucifixion was usually to be seen in the great chambers of the parliaments, and over the seats of justice. The great, solemn 13th century paintings of sacred subjects on the walls of the great hall at Siena, in which the Grand Council of the Republic assembled, are an evidence of the tone of the government. In the choice of public functionaries, fidelity, probity, were the great qualities insisted on. The injunction contained in one of the capitularies of Charlemagne gives an idea of the spirit which continued during medieval times to dominate public administration. Let no count hold his plaids, a kind of local council, unless he be fasting and fed with sense. Again, Digby quotes the following from a medieval collection of municipal laws. The town sheriff has to visit the round of the walls at night, to see that the watch has sufficient clothing. He has to inspect the provisions destined for the poor. Political principles. The fundamental principle of all medieval teaching upon public authority and civic rights was that authority comes from God and is given to the ruler solely for the people's good, and that the people whose good was to be promoted include all classes equally, rich and poor, high and low, serf, burgher, and feudal lord. Further, owing to the ingrained spirit of Christianity in favor of the poor and weak, the principle was commonly admitted that the humbler classes had the first claim upon the consideration and solicitude of the ruling powers. Thus, John of Salisbury, who died 1180, a typical 12th century political philosopher, writes, "Then, and only then, will the health of the commonwealth be sound and flourishing, when the higher members devote themselves to the lower, and when, similarly, the lower members cooperate with the higher, so that each and all are as it were members of one another, and each believes his own interests best served by what he knows to be most usefully provided for others." Again, the same author writes, "All things are to be referred to the public good, and whatever is useful for the humbler classes, that is, the multitude, should be pursued in all things. Christ will hear the poor when they cry out, and will be in vain to multiply vows, and to endeavor, as it were, to bribe God by gifts." Hence, Henry II of England describes himself, and was described, as the defender of the poor and the defenseless. Vincent of Boivas, of the Order of St. Dominic, who died 1264, who was tutor to the children of St. Louis, writes in much the same strain as John of Salisbury on the duty of the government. "There must be mutual safety for the king and the people. He errs who thinks that the king is safe when nothing is safe from the king." Tyrannical rule reprobated. Another fundamental principle strongly insisted upon in the political teaching of that age is that the most absolute power is regulated by fundamental laws against which whatever is done is, of its own nature, null and void. This principle, at variance alike with the pagan principles of absolutism and the modern liberalist view of the omnipotence of a majority, is frequently emphasized by St. Thomas, who died 1274. Thus he writes, "One is bound to obey civil rulers. in as far as the order of justice demands. Hence, if the power is not held justly, but is rather a usurpation, or if the laws are unjust, the subjects are not bound to obey, unless, perchance, in order to avoid scandal or danger. Again, the same writer has, "Those who defend the common good are not to be called seditious in resisting those who oppose it. The tyrant himself it is that is seditious, who encourages disunion and sedition in the people he rules, in order that he may more easily retain his power and control over them. For this is tyranny to aim, namely, at the personal advantage of the ruler to the detriment of the people." We find in Dante, who died 1321, whose work contains so faithful a picture of the medieval spirit, many echoes of this attitude towards unjust rule. For instance, a certain group in the infernal regions are thus referred to: "Those are the souls of tyrants, who were given to blood and rapine. Here they wail aloud their merciless wrongs." Medieval Christian democracy. Such doctrines, commonly acknowledged, and the structure of a society fashioned under their influence, effectually secured a high degree of genuine democratic rule. Despotism, understood in the sense of irresponsible rule, exercised mainly in the interests of the rulers and practically regardless of the people's rights. The system of government, which obtained all over Europe before the rise of Christianity and was reintroduced as a result of the Protestant revolt, did not generally prevail under the Christian regime of the Middle Ages. This fact, which is strongly asserted by the Catholic apologists, is acknowledged even by historians hostile to the Church. Thus, Lecky writes, "The balance of power produced by the numerous corporations which she, the Church, created or sanctioned, the reverence for tradition resulting from her teaching, which created a network of unwritten customs, with the force of public laws, and dependence of civil upon the ecclesiastical power, and the rights of excommunication and disposition, exercised by the ecclesiastical authorities, all combine to lighten the pressure of despotism." Hallam, while acknowledging the prevailing spirit of justice and democratic independence in the medieval system, does not state that this was due to the influence of Christianity. Decentralization of political power. Another very important safeguard against tyranny was the decentralization of political power. In this, the medieval state contrasts strongly with the ancient pagan states, as well as with the royal absolutism of the 17th and 18th centuries, and the centralizing tendencies of the modern bureaucracies. The extensive power conferred by royal charter on the city municipalities, which were organized on a democratic basis, and the fundamental laws and privileges of the provinces, were all strong safeguards against centralized despotism. So too was the guild organization of the towns, to which Pius XI refers as the highly developed social life, which once flourished in a variety of institutions, organically linked with each other. On the other hand, the very real power of the king, which depended largely upon popular support, acted as a check against the abuses of local barons. Conclusion. Hence, although wicked and unprincipled rulers are to be met with even in the period of which we write, their power to injure and oppress was much more limited than that of a modern bureaucracy. Widespread injustice and continued tyranny were scarcely possible, and the oppression and tyranny which did exist here and there were partially counteracted by the resources which religion supplied.